So here are three things that we need to take away from all of this. First, they do not think like us. They don't think like us. They have a different worldview. They have a different theology. And projecting our thinking onto them is not just wrong, it is catastrophically stupid because they do not think the way we do. We tend to think of ourselves in the West as competent, as in control, more in control than sometimes we are. Other cultures tend to think of people as out of control, as weak, as only strong in the collective. So what does all of that mean in terms of our rules for negotiation? Well, in the West, it means that we tend to focus on incentives and strategies that appeal to people like us. We try to look for win-win solutions where everybody is better off than they were before. And we try to set up incentives like economic prosperity or individual flourishing or safety or health. And we engage in strategies like logical problem solving, like we'll meet you in the middle, conciliation. Right? That's the stuff that the West prizes. But here's the thing. We're weird. We're not like other cultures at all, which is why every single major agreement with an Islamic opponent has ended in tears unless you have completely defeated and destroyed the possibility of that Islamic opponent actually coming back and winning. Those are the only agreements that are durable at all in the history of agreements with Islamic states. We are certainly not like the Muslim theocracy in Iran. President Trump calls them crazy. And from our perspective, they are, because they don't share our way of thinking. But from their perspective, we're both crazy and also stupid and also weak because we don't think like they do, but we assume that they do. And so they look at us and we're saying things like, why can't we just focus on human flourishing? They're like, you frickin' pansies. Like, we'll just cut your head off. So what exactly do they believe? Well, the Islamic Republic of Iran believes that in the absence of the infallible 12th Imam who will arrive at the eschaton to make the world Muslim, a qualified Islamic jurist possesses the absolute divine authority to rule both the state and society to ensure fidelity to Sharia law. But that is their actual worldview. That is why it is an Islamic regime. It can't be a democratic regime because that runs directly in the teeth of the idea that there is a divine authority absolutely invested in an Islamic jurist to rule society. This is why all of the talk about a moderate wing inside the Iranian government versus the radical wing inside the Iranian government, bunch of nonsense. In the end, the Ayatollahs run the place. And the IRGC, which in some cases is more extreme than the Ayatollahs. The Iranian regime believes that it is their duty to prepare the entire world for the arrival of the 12th Imam. Their worldview centers on replacing the current Western-led international order with a global system dominated by Islamic values. And this is where they get coalitional with Russia and China. Because again, they agree on the first step, replacing the current Western-led international order, and they disagree on the second step, what replaces it. Russia wants a Russian world order, China wants a Chinese world order, and Muslim states like Iran want an Islamic world order. They believe that Islam must become the dominant geopolitical and spiritual force on planet Earth, and that secular, capitalist, Western systems are corrupt and destined to fail. So what does all that mean in terms of Islamic rules for negotiation if you're negotiating a deal? Well, it means that lying, taqiyya is the Islamic term for it, is totally fine in wartime. It is encouraged if it gets you to where you need to go. In fact, Muhammad performed taqiyya in the middle of the Quran, and it is praised. It means that power and perception of power are literally the only coin of the realm. If you are perceived as weak, some other tribe will come and rape your wife and sell your kids into slavery, historically speaking. Okay, so how do you make a deal with people who think like this? Whose set of incentives is different, whose logical thinking is different, whose approach to negotiation is totally different? The only way to make a successful deal with people who think like this is to totally and completely devastate their capacity to win. You have to crush their hope for victory. Hope is the thing that destroys these agreements. Now, President Trump looked at Iran on an absolute level and he kept saying, they're dead, right? Dead economy. Military basically defenestrated. Ballistic missile facilities gone. Missile launchers tremendously damaged. Nuclear facilities blown up. A navy at the bottom of the sea. A leadership class entirely dead. And he said, okay, well, I guess they're defeated. Now it's time for them to negotiate their surrender. Here's what they saw. An America that wanted to negotiate. An America that was afraid to finish them off. An America that was not going to forcibly open the strait and in fact was begging for the strait to be opened. Begging them for the strait to be open. Well, the answer is something fundamental. Iran cannot appear weak. That is the entire game. And because Iran cannot appear weak, right? The minute they appear weak, this is the entire game in the Middle East. Once they appear weak, their regime is in danger. It's the reason they were seeking a nuclear weapon in the first place. They never interpreted the nonsensical and empty memorandum of understanding negotiated by the vice president the way that we did. Vice President J.D. Vance and the administration came home waving that MOU with Iran and shouting peace in our time. But as I said at the time, it wasn't a deal, not just because it wasn't a final deal, but because it wasn't a deal at all. A deal requires an agreement on the terms. A deal requires an agreement on the terms. Again, this is fundamental to contract law. If you and I have an agreement that means nothing, like there are no words in the agreement, it is not an agreement. You have to have defined terms where both sides have a meeting of the minds.